Hey, this is probably going to be one of the scariest videos, maybe one of the most important videos that I made in a while, and I just wanted to make it so that maybe like 10 years down the road, I could look at it and just see how much of it is true. So this video is going to be about the rise and fall of empires. I've been actually studying the history of money for a while, and the history of money is very closely correlated to the history of rise and fall of empires. And so I've been learning all kinds of interesting things, and I wanted to share in a video because one of the best ways I learn is just by retelling stories, retelling things I've learned in a way that makes sense to me, and maybe you'll find it interesting. So I have kind of this picture that I've drawn up here, and this isn't all my data, this is all my, I didn't come up with this. The guy that actually came up with kind of this rise and fall thing, his name is Ray Dalio. If you want to look it up, he has a book called, I think it's like Changing World Order, which sounds weird, but it basically talks about how empires rise and then how they fall. And hopefully this isn't backwards, but you can see here the span of a country rising to the end of the empire is around 100 to 250 years. And that's an estimate. So we can say like most humans live 60 or 70 or 80 years old, but there's definitely humans that tragically only live to 10 years old. There's humans that live up to 115. I think there's been a human that lived to 120 years old. So it drastically changes based on different characteristics. But you can kind of tell if someone's in the beginning of their life, the beginning of an empire, or if they're at an end of their life, an end of their empire, by measuring certain things. So whether that be their heart rate, how much they weigh, what their oxygen saturation, stuff like that is. You can kind of tell where they're headed based on certain measurements. And so that's what some of these are measurements, characteristics along the lifespan of an empire. Right now we're in the U.S. Empire, the U.S. United States American empire, and empire is a weird word, but what it means is that we're kind of the country that like controls the world, and you don't have to believe that, you don't have to say that, but for the past at least 50 to 100 years, we've kind of been the top dog. And so I kind of want to go over this graph, and I'll preface it by saying this graph works in like all of the top empires. So all of this stuff is true, the rise and fall of all the past empires as well. The Dutch Empire, Ottoman Empire, Spanish Empire, British, Japanese, Indian, Russian, like these are all true among all these past empires. And so we shouldn't be too special and say that it's not going to happen to the American Empire. And so what we can do is we can look at this and kind of guess where we're at. So I'm going to turn it around here so I can look at it. And I'm going to talk about the first, actually I think the guy that came up with this classifies this into three parts. The rise, the peak, and the fall. So I'm going to talk about the rise first. And usually a country is born by winning a war. Or rather, a new empire is born by winning a war, which America clearly did. We won a war, and because that war was won, and we won it, other people don't really want to battle us. We don't really have other people to fight. And for a long time after we win a country or an empire wins a war, there's usually peace, and some prosperity as well, because they just won a war. They get the spoils of war. They don't have to fight anyone else for a while. And usually one of the first investments that an empire or a country makes is in education. And because of this, and this is kind of, we're going along this first third here, because we won a war, we then put money and invest into our citizens, specifically in terms of education. We make them smarter, and we make them better humans. And because of that, the outcome of that is people being smarter. The country itself has better tech. We have better technology, better things of like understanding of the world, and because of that, because the country has better tech, we then get more competitive because now we have the latest best computer, we have agricultural machines that can do amazing things. And so we're going up here, we invested in tech, and then because our people are smarter, or we invested in education, our people are smarter, now we get better tech, and because we get better tech, we're now competitive, we're more competitive among all the other sub-empires, the other countries and stuff we're trading with. And then we're still going up on this rise of this empire. After that is a strong economy because we have a lot of money flowing in because we have a bunch of technology and exports that are flowing out. Usually after a strong economy, when the economy is strong, usually families are also strong. And what that means is that people are just treating other people well, relationships are good. And not just like interpersonal relationships, but like you meet someone on the street. Usually you would rather meet someone on the street in a country that's doing well than meet someone in a street than in a country that's in poverty and about to collapse, is what I'm saying. And you can kind of see that in the rise of this empire. Usually right after, another measurement is happiness. People are usually really happy as times are getting better. And because times are getting better, people start to become more content. And that's when we start going from the rising to the peak. And so after people are the general population is just happy, we start to get more content and we get a little less productive. And what does this mean? Well, I think America is either here or just past here. But I think what it means in today's world, and back in the older empires, less productive meant less exports. You're making less stuff, you're producing less things to send to other countries, to help your citizens. You're just making less. You're just enjoying what you have, and you're making less. In today's world, what that looks like is when I think of the iPhone, like an iPhone that people have now, compared to 10 years ago, those two iPhones, there are definitely differences. The cameras are maybe a little better. There's different apps. The operating system is better. Maybe it's faster. They're basically the same iPhone, though. The same with computers. In the course of history, for a long time, we didn't have personal computers, and then boom, we got computers. And that's like when everyone was able to have a computer, like a personal computer is what a PC, that's what this tech was. We invested in education, so then we got new tech. But then after we got computers, the computers aren't really getting better. In the past 10 years, I mean, you can say that they're getting better graphics, they're getting faster, but they're not really, there's no like big innovation happening in the world of computers. The same with airplanes. When we went from no airplanes to having airplanes and being able to travel all around efficiently and mostly cheaply, that was a big boom. But now the costs of being on an airplane traveling to another part of the country, there's not huge innovation in that. It's like not like the costs are a tenth now because of innovation or tech. Basically what I'm saying is that we are being less productive. We're not over-engineering, we're not creating things that are like just blowing other things out of the water like we did maybe 50 to 100 years ago, or even 20 years ago. Things are just starting to slow down the innovation of new things. Of course, we have new things like quantum computing and the rise of certain AI models and stuff, and those are huge, but those are also happening around the world, not just in our country, not just in our empire. So let's keep going. The next thing after, where are we? Less productive is a wealth gap. And I don't really have to say much about this because most people know what a wealth gap is. It's where the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And that's just a part of how the world works. If you're lending money at an interest rate, usually you accumulate more money. And if you're paying an interest rate, usually your net worth goes down because you're paying that interest rate with the principal. So the rich are going to get richer, the poor are going to get poorer. And that is kind of where you can start to see where we're at the peak here. This wealth gap, and as time goes on, the wealth gap widens. So in countries that the empires where they fell, you can kind of look and see like there are a very small percentage of people who are super wealthy, and then there were a bunch of, I don't know, peasants, just common folk that didn't really have any net worth. They just didn't have anything to pass on, and you can kind of see this in today's world, in the U.S. After the increasing wealth gap is overextended, which is like basically we have margined ourselves, we have lent out more money than we're making. So basically we're going in debt. And that's actually the next thing after overextending is large debts. And specifically for our country, we are over $30 trillion in debt right now. And I could have a whole conversation. It might be another video I make about who we're in debt to. Because you say the US owes $30 trillion. Who does it owe that to? Well, the reality is I think a third of it, maybe a half of it, it owes to its citizens. And then some others, like other foreign countries we owe money to. Some of it is within itself, like a government entity owes money to another government entity. That is a part of debt that is calculated in the total debt clock. But I mean, $30 trillion, I don't know if you've ever seen 30 trillion written out. It's a ton of zeros, a lot of money. A lot of this money can't, I think if you sold all the houses in the United States, it would be 50 trillion. And so the United States is 30 trillion in debt that it owes to its people and other people. So I definitely think we check this box. Our debt, we have large debt and it's growing larger by the day. I think 20% of our country's expenses is the interest payment on that debt, which is not a good thing. What's next? Printing money. I don't have to say much about this. Although I do want to kind of share some stories about other empires that have printed money. that just caused the economic, that currency to basically devalue. And the U.S. is definitely doing this. We're printing all kinds of money. And for a long time, we were on something called the gold reserve, which meant for every dollar of gold we had, we could print a dollar bill. If the U.S. got another piece of gold, we could print another dollar bill. That stopped happening. Actually, you could argue that it happened in the 1970s, but it actually stopped happening in the 1930s, I believe, because the United States actually made gold illegal to own. So they had a couple-day period where you could sell your gold to the government, because the government obviously wants to hoard all this gold. They want all the gold for themselves. And then they made it illegal to own so that the citizens couldn't have the gold. And you might be wondering why that happened. And like I said, I can make a whole other video on this, on why gold was illegal. But it was mostly so that the government themselves could have the gold to then print more dollars to stimulate the economy. It was also incentivized so that other countries would sell their gold to the U.S. and it would stay in the U.S.'s treasury. So the U.S., there was a time period during the Great Depression when the gold that the U.S. had started leaving. It started going to other countries. People started hoarding it, even in the U.S. And the U.S. was like, whoa, no, keep your gold in here. And they did that so much, they literally made gold illegal to own in 1933, and it was illegal to own from 1933 all the way to 1971. Most people don't know that. Gold was illegal to own. And that is because gold was what backed our dollar. You could take a dollar into a bank and get gold equivalent out of it. I'm actually not sure about that because it was illegal to own, but for a portion of time, you could do that. Then they made it illegal, and then you might be wondering, gold's legal to own now. Why is it legal to own? Well, we actually went off the gold standard, which means we don't need to hold gold anymore to back our dollars. Now, the long story short, we can just print as much money as we want. Want another $20 billion, and just put in a couple numbers in a database, and then boom, there's $20 billion to do whatever you want with. And I say that to say that this printing money is what the U.S. is doing right now. We are printing a ton of money. We have very large debts. We're overextended. What comes next? Internal conflicts. So this is conflicts within the nation. And there's an election coming up in 2024. And I don't have to say much about it other than the fact that I believe most people watching this video would agree with me that it's going to be conflicting. Whoever wins, there's going to be a lot of people who are upset. So I believe that the U.S. has already risen, and it's at the end of its peak, and it's going to start going downhill. There's a way we can get out of this and actually start getting better. Now, that's the whole point of this video. But after internal conflicts is loss of reserve currency, and if you've been watching the news lately, I actually don't watch that much news, but I've heard other people talk to me about it, about the Chinese yuan being the new reserve currency. That is part of it. Because they've printed so much money, other countries don't even want that money. And I said the US dollar as an example. In Rome, when the Roman Empire was like growing and then peaked, they actually started reducing the amount of silver in their coin. It was the term called debasement. So maybe you have 1 pound of silver. Well, now it's still a pound, but only half of it is silver. The other half is something else. Because there's basically just less silver and more of something else. And they did that so that they could print more money with less silver, or the same amount of silver. In medieval England, they did the same thing. They did it with copper. They started putting more copper in the silver coin. So again, there's tons of examples of this playing out. And where are we in this talk right now? Loss of reserve currencies. There's actually been a lot of fear in the last 6 months that because the U.S. has been printing so much money, the U.S. is going to lose its status as a reserve currency. And what that means is that basically that other countries, so you know how we had gold, and for every piece of gold we had, we could have a dollar? We had to have gold in reserve to print a dollar. Well, when you say your reserve currency, other countries do that, but instead of gold, they have your dollar. So Zimbabwe, I'll just use that as an example. Maybe they want their currency to be pretty good. So what they'll do is they'll say, for every US dollar we have, we can print 2 Zimbabwe dollars. That's what it means to be a reserve currency. After the loss of reserve currency, and there's a ton of things I've learned about being a reserve currency that I wish I could say in this video, but we're at 15 minutes already. So the next thing is weak leadership, which I'm not going to say too much about. And the last thing is war. They usually, if a country loses this war, it will be the end of an empire. And one note here, this war can be internal or external. So among these empires I mentioned, some of them were internal wars, where other people didn't even invade them. It was just the country reorganizing itself through an internal war. The Civil War, some form of a reorganization of the country because it had peaked and fallen. And so, again, I made this whole video to kind of show you that my mind was blown that this ingredient, I don't know if you'd call it an ingredient list, this rise, peak, and fall of empires have happened in history tons of times. The Dutch Empire, Ottoman Empire, Spanish, British, Japanese, Indian, Russian. I'm reading off a list here. And I believe the U.S. might be added to that list. There are two things that we can do that if we are here to not go down here and fall of the U.S. empire through war. And the first one is to earn more than you spend. So both of these things I'm about to say are actually personal philosophies that you can actually adopt, I think, to be better. But as a nation, we can also adopt to be a better nation. So one of the reasons that these empires fall is because they are printing so much money. They're in a ton of debt. They're just in a bad economic situation. Most of these countries, empires that fell, it was because their economies were in shambles. And so to get your economy out of being in shambles, you have to earn more than you spend. Wow, our dryer's making all kinds of noise over there, which is really simple. I could explain that. It basically means you need to take in more money, whether that be a tax through imports, tariffs, a tax on your citizens for owning land, for making money, for trading, whatever it is, you have to make that money up somehow because the government's obviously spending money. And the second one is very simple. It's to treat others well. So this internal conflict here can usually be resolved. In many cases, it can be resolved just by treating others well. The only thing I want to say on this is no matter what side you vote on, what left or right, how you see the other side says a lot about you as a person and about us as a country. So if there are a lot of negative feelings for the other side, maybe we need to focus on this. Even if you disagree with them, part of America was founded in the fact that we could disagree with each other, but still live our own lives in freedom. And so I think it's really important to remember this, to treat others well. And I don't need to define that. You know what that means. But anyways, this is the longest video I think I've ever done, 17, 18 minutes. Hopefully I look back in this video in 10 years and we're not here. Hopefully I look back and maybe we have figured this out, and maybe we're starting another curve, which there are times in history when that has happened. It's very rare. But we'll see. The two tricks as a personal philosophy that I encourage you and future me to adopt is to earn more than you spend, basically make a profit, and to treat others well. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully I watched this video in 10 years and are happy with where our country is. We'll see.